right, bonus content, I guess. Maybe we'll put this in a separate video. All right, here's a tough ones. All right, God versus Satan. God committed genocides, asked a man to kill his only child, allowed slavery, made women inferior to men, caused all the suffering in the world, convinced two people to eat a fruit. God did not do that, apparently, but the rest of the stuff he's responsible for. The interesting thing about this meme is that it presupposes that the biblical account is accurate, but it judges the morality of the events that happened in the biblical account. So to rehash what we were talking about before we hit record, the first thing that jumps out is the made women inferior to men part. It's it's the problem is that God made women inferior to men. Not there's not an argument that women are not inferior to men. The Church of Satan,
we all know it.
Yeah, they say, well, I mean, it's just fact, but it's God's fault, but it's a fact. Like, it presupposes that women are inferior. And it's like, okay. Even the biblical account, you would have to put a big asterisk next to inferior if you want to say that that's the biblical description, because you could translate some words some way, but so we'll get to that in the list. All right, first, committed genocides. If you want to blame somebody for death, blaming the person who introduced death into the world by introducing sin into the world, that would be Satan. Even Jesus dies as a result of Satan. So all of the genocides that happen. So this is one of the there's a tangential argument that I'm trying to avoid thinking about because it's going to distract me. But the idea of death is God doesn't create death. Death is the consequence of sin. So all of genocide meaning killing people, a lot of people dying, all of that is a result of sin, not a result of the good or very good that God created in creation. So whoever is responsible for good and very good going to, and then sin and death entered into the world, that's the guy who's responsible for the genocides. That being said, if God saw fit to move man between this world and the next, it's his prerogative to do so. Satan doesn't have that authority. The reason he likes death in the world is because he's getting in trouble, and like a spoiled toddler, he wants to take down as many people with him as possible. Asking a man to kill his only child, that's supposed to be shocking. That, the fact that this is on the list misses the entire point, because that is the point. God asking Abraham to kill his son, and if you read the account, it doesn't just say his son. He says your son, your only begotten son. It's brutally emotional. The language is it's supposed to make you uncomfortable. That's the point. How weighty is it to be asked to kill your only son? And yet Abraham has faith and is credited to him as righteousness. Later on, I believe in the New Testament, I think it's Paul. It might be in Hebrews. I don't remember. I think Paul talks about Abraham had faith that even if he had killed Isaac, that God would have restored Isaac to him. So Abraham had faith that regardless why God was asking him to do this thing, God would sort out the situation. And of course, the whole point of that story is Jesus. So Abraham is asked to kill his only son. That's emotionally brutal. How much more emotionally brutal is it that the son, Jesus, volunteers to die for the sins of mankind? And the father accepts the sacrifice of the son. The father doesn't prevent the son from dying, but the father accepts the sacrifice of the son. And if you look
you can even make the case that Isaac was roughly that age as well by this point in the story. If you look at birth timelines and whatnot, he was probably in his 20s to 30s. He wasn't a small child that Abraham was forcing to. This is something that Isaac would have been able to overpower Abraham if he wanted, and this is something he was volunteering as well.
Yeah, Abraham is an older guy at this point, and Isaac is strong enough to carry the wood up, enough wood for a burnt sacrifice, as we learn later, for a goat or whatever it is, or a ram, enough wood for a burnt sacrifice, and Isaac's able to carry this up. All right, allowed slavery. This is just kind of intentionally obtuse. The distinctions between the different types of slavery are important to notice. If we just call everything slavery, if we call servitude slavery, like the word doulos, the Greek word, I had a professor who did an entire thesis on the concept of biblical slavery, and there's actually so many different kinds of things that are referred to as slavery that just calling it all slavery just it glosses over some very significant differences. So, for example, the ancient Israelites version of slavery would be kind of like, I can't pay my bills, I owe you money, and I can't afford to feed my family. How do we resolve the situation? And this slavery is actually a social welfare program where God institutes, and he says, okay, basically you offer yourself into servitude for another family, and they take care of you, and you work for them rather than for a paycheck. They'll take care of you, and then after a set period of time, obviously all the debts are forgiven, all the land returns to its original owners, and all the slaves are set free unless they decide that they want to continue with their masters. That's not the same as the chattel slavery we see and we're familiar with in Islamic culture and in early United States culture. The other aspect of allowing slavery is slavery itself isn't a good thing. Even in the cases of the social welfare program, it's a solution to a problem that exists as a result of sin. A perfect world does not have slavery in it of any sort. That being said, in the New Testament, there's language like making yourself or being a slave to Christ, willingly giving up your own autonomy to be perfectly subservient to a perfect master, and that's good. That's appropriate. And then. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, the whole slavery thing, it's such a complicated topic to just kind of like. Yeah. Just boil it down to God likes slavery, he endorses it. And it's like not as such. Like, really. How many hours do you have to sit down and talk about this? And how many languages would you like? Right. Yeah. Okay. The best point. Yeah. Made women inferior to men. Ed. That is that is an interesting worldview to have. Not necessarily a Christian worldview. I think if I recall right, when God creates Eve, he talks about making a helpmate for Adam. And if I remember right, the same term that's used to refer to the Holy Spirit, the Paraclete, is used to refer to Eve. It's an honorific that basically says that, yes, you are going to be in a position of supporting rather than leading, but that doesn't mean that you're inferior. That just means, like, which is inferior, your head or your body? Neither can live without the other. And this is the example in Ephesians 5. But yeah, this is such a Fedora moment to be like, women are inferior to men and it's God's fault. And it's like, chill. I can tell you're not married
because they won't date me.
They won't date me in my Fedora collection. Yeah, this is getting demonetized. Yeah, I don't get paid for these anyway. It's okay. Okay, let me see. Caused all the suffering in the world. This kind of goes back to the first point. Like, who's the cause of all the suffering in the world? The one that creates everything that's good, or the one that intentionally screws things up, tricks somebody into...
Well, and I notice too, a big theme here seems to be dumping all personal responsibility. I'm not the cause of any suffering. It's that God that did it,
You know the funny line,
nah,
I think,
bro, like.
Yeah, you've got a stake in it. Like, I think my grandpa used to always say, and he said it jokingly, but he would say, the excuse to get out of any trouble that you're in is just say the devil made me do it. And this is like the exact opposite. It's like, it's God's fault. This is, I don't know. Right. That's almost like when I'm picking on my poor beloved Christian Calvinist friends. Like, God predestined me to bully you. Like, I can't control my actions. It was predetermined. Yeah. All right. Convince two people to eat a fruit. I'm trying to think. Well, I was gonna say they've got the tree of life in the garden in the garden. I'm trying to think of it. If there's a specific example where God does have people eat fruit. Obviously, the tree of life later on is represented. That's the cross, and those who eat from the food that's born off of the tree of life will live. That's Eucharistic. But yeah, I guess, there you go. That's 1 point for the Satanists. Good job, Satan, convincing people to eat fruit. That's a moral positive, I guess.
It's funny, it's funny. I had Wolf Miller on the podcast, and he made this point that the devil always tries to frame breaking the law as love.
Yeah.
As the true expression of love, as opposed to keeping the law, which is the true expression of love. And, and so this is doing that, right? Because it's, he just, fruit's good for you. He convinced 2 people to eat fruit. Isn't that great? And it's like, well, no, because it's fruit that they were explicitly commanded not to eat.
Yeah, it's like convince somebody to eat like poison fruit. That's not
right.
It's not a good thing. Like, well, it was delicious. No. It's like, yeah, it was nightshade, but okay, Yeah, convince 2 people to eat fruit. So I guess, this kind of undercuts the entire meme if you really think about it. Yeah, what was the consequence of that, do you wonder? Like everything else on the list.
All the everything else on the list.
Well, except for the inferior women. According to Satanists, that's women have always been inferior. That's that's like their law, it's like their satanic creed or whatever. I believe that all women are inferior. To Fedora instead of genuflecting. I don't know.
Oh,